Good morning. Good morning. I hate to do that. Good morning, and welcome to your MPO meeting. Will everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and invocation? Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our gracious and heavenly Father, we are so thankful that you touched us with your loving hands this morning to awaken us to see another one of your beautiful days. For that, we say thank you. We ask that you be with us today as we make decisions to make this county the best it possibly can be, and as we look into the future to find out how we can move people around this county as we continue to grow with leaps and bounds. We know that you will be with us as we make these decisions. Father, we ask that you protect those that are first responders and wearing uniforms, whether military uniforms or our first responder uniforms, that you put your loving arms around them and protect them, guide them, comfort them, and keep them, take them back to their homes when their service is done to find everything safe and sound. When our work is done today, we ask you to take us back to our homes and find everything safe and sound. These are all blessings we ask in your righteous and holy name. Amen. Good morning again. You have had the opportunity to review the April 2nd, 2019 minutes. If there are no corrections or additions, may I have a motion to approve those minutes? Motion by Commissioner Overman, second by Councilman Maniscalco. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, let it be known by saying aye. All those opposed, motion passes. Public comment. I have somewhere here some.
Mr. Fernandez and Mr. Jessup.
There we go. Right. Okay. Public comment. We have 3 minutes per person. The first person is Mr. Doug Jessup. My tongue is tied up this morning. Sorry about that. Good morning.
Good morning. Doug Jessup, 6007 Sewanee Avenue, Tampa. I'm here to speak about item 7A, the update on TBX, or Tampa Bay Next, as it's been rebranded. And I'd like to point out first, my day job, I'm a professor at the University of South Florida. I teach, among other things, logic and the theory of rational choice. And back when I was in graduate school, the economist Herbert Simon, Nobel Prize winner, came to Princeton and gave a seminar. It was actually quite interesting. It was about the notion of bounded rationality and the satisficing model of choice, which is details you don't need to know about. But what's interesting is that, as Simon pointed out, it's an absolutely minimal constraint on rational action. That one adjusts one's plans in the light of available evidence. As evidence rolls in, one's plans, expectations, beliefs ought to be sensitive to changes in information. What does this have to do with FDOT District 7? What does it have to do with item 7A? What does it have to do with TBX? The answer is that the entire scheme of Tampa Bay Next, the entire TBX scheme, is built around the 1996 Tampa Interstate Study. That's the foundation of the plan. And the fact of the matter is that in 1996, people were doing the Macarena, and people were excited about Windows 95. It was a very dark time, and one of the bad things that came out of the mid-90s was the Tampa Interstate Study. And I point out that many of the people whose preferences are enshrined in that study are now dead. This thing is 25 years old, and yet we have a fossilized demand model that's been built upon this. And it might be interesting to go back and re-examine the assumptions behind the demand model, the assumptions that actually motivate the entire set of plans for TBX, the entire set of plans for I-275 and I-4. And the fact of the matter is that that model assumes that no one wants to live downtown or in Tampa Heights or in Ybor or in Seminole Heights or pretty much anywhere but suburbia. And if you look at the way the model is constructed, the assumption is that if 10,000 family units move to the Tampa Bay area, 9,920 of them are going to want to live out in Sprawlopolis, in Brandon or wherever. Remember, when this thing was built, or when this study was constructed, New Tampa was new and exciting. But the fact of the matter is, of course, that just ignores the way that development has worked in this county. There are thousands and thousands of units that have been added to downtown. There's an enormous increase in property values, an enormous increase in demand for property in Tampa Heights and Seminole Heights, for example. Try to buy a house there now compared to 30 years ago. And what we need then is a study that actually reflects those facts. The irony, of course, is that if you want to suggest anything to FDOT about making some minor change, adding a crossing signal or something like that, it has to be studied studied to death. But studying something as major as the TBX proposal, that apparently is off the table. And I urge you then to ask for an additional study for TBX. Thank you very much.
Mr. Rick Fernandez.
Good morning. Rick Fernandez, 2906 North Elmore, Tampa 33602. I'm out of Tampa Heights. I was commiserating with my friend Professor Jessup before starting up here this morning that this month marks 4 years to the month, if not the day, when the letters TBX were both heard, first heard by these ears. That's when the Florida Department of Transportation came to Tampa Heights to inform us about their plans for the TBX project. A lot of water under that bridge, no pun intended, since then, and some of you that are sitting up at that dais today actually walked our picket lines, if you will, regarding TBX back in the day. So we've come a long way. What we did not have back then in 2015 or at any time until around 2017 was a competing vision for the TBX project. Now we do, and it's called the Boulevard Tampa Project. It is something that has been presented to this board on more than one occasion and to several civic organizations over the last 2 to 3 years. You'll remember a presentation by Josh Frank at a TIP hearing here. I think it was in 2017. I had the pleasure of introducing him for that. And we now have moved that concept forward to the point where the Citizens Advisory Committee, where I have the pleasure of serving, has passed a motion at our last meeting, just a couple of weeks ago, to further study the project, to do a feasibility study. We had a good discussion on it. It passed unanimously. And the request coming up to the MPO board was that you amend the UPWP, the Unified Planning Work Program, which is on your agenda today at line item 7B, to include a line item for that study. So if your mind's eye is somewhat imaginative and you could imagine me on bended knee, I am here on bended knee today asking you, please, 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 if nothing else, since 2015, perhaps we should at least take a moment and study this and see if it has feasibility and merit. Our chair, Mr. Roberts, will be here in just a few moments to make a presentation regarding the CAC. First time that's been done, at least in my tenure there, so I think he's going to be speaking more on that. So let me leave that behind. Second portion of the presentation, line item 7A on the TIP and TB Next. I'm asking you to strike the portions of the TIP that relate to Section 6, that's the downtown interchange, and Section 7, which is the corridor north of the downtown interchange. I have more, but I'm out of time. I'll be here if anybody has questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chris Vila.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Christopher Vell, 9241 East 11th Avenue in Ybor City, 33605. So page 10 of your agenda is an exciting project. It got a lot of traction in the bike pedestrian and also the CAC. The Boulevard project is not just trying to do something different and to be cool like other cities. It is actually a restoration project. For so long, I-275 has been a wall dividing our community. With the Boulevard project, we'll have over 40 points of access. East Tampa will now be fully connected to West Tampa. Same thing is going to happen as we go up to the university area. There could be some tremendous opportunities as well on the northern part of our downtown area. As you know, there is some exciting developments happening over there. And I think we're going to gain about 30 to 35 new acres of land to do some strategy where we can do affordable housing, business development. So what this all means basically is a return on interest. So this is something that we can get from this project that we don't see at all with the TB Next project. Line 29 is really bothering me, and so I'm hoping that this board asks some questions, some hard questions to FDOT. This is line 29 from the TIP. It talks about capacity with all this interstate work. And I want to know what that means. Does capacity mean that we're going to widen? Does it mean that we're going to add more lanes to the local interstates? Because the last time I've checked over the past several years that I've come up here, a lot of the community doesn't want induced demand. We don't want to be stuck in metal boxes anymore. We actually want to have some choices and some ability to connect better to our neighborhood districts. So I would definitely question on that. I know I sent out some information. I'd prefer that you all were to really analyze that line 29 and just only earmark it for safety improvements. I don't think we need to add any more capacity. I think that's the direction that we don't need to go, especially with the local referendum money that we have at hand. Saying no to TB Next is not a permanent thing. Federal review has to happen. I was told every 3 years on the interstates. And so the key is as we move forward with our local projects, this allows us time to get those things going. This allows us time to kind of set a tone to say, well, the local choices matter first. And then FDOT can come from behind and help us with the regional connections later. But right now, we have to support the highest tax base that we have here, which is the downtown area in Tampa. Also, in your packet, page 47, the MPO is going through a certification process. Part of that certification process involves a merger study. I would strike that out. We don't want to lose local representation from the Hillsborough County. I certainly want to see this MPO get certified, but I want that study removed from part of that packet to proceed that process. So again, your community matters, so you got to be there for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Connie Burton?
Morning, Connie Burton, 4210 Fate Court, Tampa. I came to really thank another board this morning. I thought I was running into the Board of County Commissioners to thank all of you all for the $5.2 million that you set aside for a housing initiative that is so well needed. And I mean, daily I'm running into people that are utilizing a hotel as their permanent housing situation. But I'm glad I'm here. So why I'm here is that I know when transportation comes to our community, and I'm talking about in particular East Tampa, it has meant tremendous loss. Once upon a time, there was a black business district, and it is no more. With the expansion of even toll has meant the shutdown of major economic hubs that could have increased tremendous value in our community. 40th Street, there's no access to people that want to even do business in terms of that being an exit point. There has been talk about possibly shutting down on Nebraska. It's coming, but as y'all make the decision, think about the economic long-term, short-term impact that it's having on well-needed communities. We are being displaced. We are being forced out of our community because of these expansions. And so I would hope that as you continue to gain light, and not that you don't understand, I know you do, that all people matters, that we don't want to be forced out of communities simply because there's road expansions, that we got to find a way to be more inclusive, and we do not want to see our community isolated and we don't benefit economically as these projects move forward. Thank you this morning.
Thank you. Mr. Ron Weaver?
Chairman, Ron Weaver, 401 East Jackson Street. At our last meeting, I asked some questions about the interstate additions of 2 additional lanes, one north and one south, from downtown to Bearst Avenue or thereabouts, for about $300 million, no tolls involved, in order to solve the problem of about 250% capacity that I-275 north of downtown will be in the next decade or so. I'm concerned that you lose an opportunity. Shakespeare said, there comes a tide in the affairs of men, which taken at the flood leads on to fortune, and if missed, only to misery and despair. If you've been on I-275 north between 7:30 and about 9 o'clock in the morning coming south, or you've been on I-275 north between about 4 o'clock and about 6:15 in the afternoon, you know what misery and despair are beyond anything Shakespeare could have imagined. It's not a matter of 250% of capacity in the next decade or so. It's a matter of 126 million tourists trying to come and trying to get around. Yes, there's some people living downtown, and I admire my colleagues who are working to make sure that we do right by a boulevard or a fix of I-275. I think we need to fix I-275, and then if a boulevard earns its day, so be it. But don't let this money that might be a mere $300 million, not a billion, not a half a billion, just $300 million to build one additional lane north, one additional lane south from downtown to Bear so that we can relieve congestion with respect to the necessities of the next 5 or 10 years. That rail will come, that the boulevard, that CSX, that Virgin and the connections to Virgin will solve our problems with our off-road transportation, if it survives the lawsuit, of course, which hopefully it will and it should. Let's not miss a chance to take $300 million, add 1 lane north and 1 lane south to I-275 from downtown to Bears and get on with the business of the next 5 or 10 years, and then do right by the next 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 years. But first, let's try to relieve the congestion to enable those 126 million tourists to Florida to use our interstate without having putting them on I-4, putting them on I-75, putting them on Florida Avenue, or putting them on Nebraska, none of which 4 alternatives are better than simply fixing I-275 and getting on with the commerce and the mobility of our community. Thank you.
Thank you. That was the last speaker card I had. Is there anyone else wishing to address us this morning in public comment? Seeing none, thank you very much. We now move into committee reports. It's an honor for me to introduce Mr. Bill Roberts, who's the chair of the Citizens Advisory Committee. I had an opportunity to meet with them this week. Had a good discussion on a lot of issues, and he's here with us this morning. Glad to have you here, Mr. Roberts. Good morning.
Mr. Chairman and members of the MPO board, thank you for having me. It's good to be here. Thank you for the invitation to begin presenting reports to you from our Citizens Advisory Committee. Chairman Miller was kind enough to spend the better part of an hour with us earlier this week. We had a good discussion about things that were of interest to a number of our committee members. Our report is contained in your packet, and I won't belabor that point. We did deal in our last meeting with a couple of action items, which you're aware of. We addressed the 2 items on the transportation improvement program. There were amendments to that, and we did an amendment to the MPO's Unified Planning Work Program. As was mentioned earlier, the Citizens Advisory Committee had a robust discussion about the boulevard concept. The result of that was a motion to ask this board to include a study of the boulevard concept in your planning going forward. As Mr. Weaver so eloquently mentioned, we have a problem there. It needs to be addressed. We need to look at all reasonable alternatives and then come to a decision. So I look forward to coming before you in subsequent meetings. You have a very active Citizens Advisory Committee. We are at nearly full strength, and we have some 20 members who attend. We always have a quorum. We conduct our business, I think, in a civil but yet active way, and you're certainly welcome to inquire with any questions that you may have. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them, but I wanted to give you a brief report this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Overman, you're recognized.
Yes.
Mr. Roberts, it's good to see you. I am a product, oftentimes, of the CAC meeting, and I want to share with this group, if you haven't had a chance to sit on their meetings and listen to their meetings, it's quite impressive, the citizens' commitment to excellence and full dialogue on what we're doing. The value of having a Citizens Advisory Committee is immeasurable when it comes to giving us guidance on what our community as a whole from all over the county feel is an important issue to consider in the work that we do. It is the feedback we need to make the decisions that we make. I appreciate the work that's there. They are long meetings. We think we have long meetings. They are long meetings, and this is volunteer time of citizens that have made the commitment to spend a Wednesday morning, oftentimes till noon, really debating issues of which they hope we're listening to. So I thank you for your commitment. I thank your entire committee for the great work that it does, and the staff that supports that committee, because they do an excellent job. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'll relay those comments to the committee. I know they will appreciate them. Any other questions you may have?
I see none, Mr. Roberts.
Thank you very much,
Thank you,
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Kipp, you're recognized.
I just want to say that I'm really happy that we have the expertise and the all that thinking that, and just can't even believe how much the CAC reviews things so thoroughly and with such depth. And I'm really pleased that we're going to start having your reports here to add to what we can think about, expand our world a little here, and inform us about what's going on there. But so I'm really happy to see this coming now as a permanent resource.
Good. Thank you, Commissioner.
Anyone else? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Ms. Torres.
Good morning, Commissioners, board members, and Mr. Chair. I wanted to just share you quickly some of the other committees' actions that they took last month at their meetings. The TAC approved your action items for today. The BPAC also passed a motion supporting the CAC's request for a formal study of the boulevard concept and asked that impacts on bicycling and pedestrian also be included in the study. The Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee approved and forwarded the items on your consent agenda. It was appointment of Wanda Vinson and a letter to the Tampa Police Department to ask them to come speak to the BPAC about policies about cars parking on sidewalks and in bike lanes. Committees also heard presentations on the Tampa Bay Next update and the transportation sales surtax. The Technical Advisory Committee offered to act as a sounding board for that during that process. We want to take part in that if the IOC would like some input from your technical appointees. The ITS Committee discussed the data and analytics platform and will be forming a working group to delve into details on developing that scope of work. The Transportation Disadvantage Coordinating Board approved the 2019-2020 rates per trip for the Sunshine Line. Overall rates will increase by $1 over the current fiscal year, and customer co-pays are not affected. They also reapproved the guidance procedures, noting that there have been no complaints in the last 10 years regarding the Sunshine Line services. The MPO Chairs Coordinating Committee discussed the regional chapter of the long-range transportation plans. Members expressed interest in creating a standalone regional LRTP next year. The regional document will include the Tri-County vision created by Hillsborough, Pinellas, and Pasco MPOs, and then the relationship between the Tri-County area and the adjacent MPOs to the north, south, and east. There was discussion of the evolving relationship between TBARTA and the MPOs. TBARTA, as they're focusing more on their regional transit development plan. And the next meeting of the MPO chairs will be July 19th at the Florida Hospital Center in Pasco County. There'll be a briefing on Pasco's Connected City project and a welcome from Commissioner Catherine Starkey. So that's the other committees besides your Citizens Advisory Committee report. I do have the online comments, and I'll quickly go through those. And just as a quick reminder, these are for people who aren't able to come to these meetings, so we have offered them the opportunity to share comments. Their full comments are in your folders. So we had 3 Facebook posts. Michelle Cookson requests that you include the CAC recommendations for the Boulevard study, remove item 29 from the TIP, and oppose continued pressure to merge the MPOs. She feels these actions will address the community's ongoing consistent desire to get transit plans in place. Ingrid Jacoba also asked that you buy the CSX lines to link USF to downtown. Do not fund TB Next. Require that there's be a no-build option. Develop the Boulevard concept and present it as part of a cohesive long-term transit plan, and commit seriously to making Vision Zero objectives a reality. Rick Fernandez also did post. There was a couple things I see he didn't cover, and maybe you can check your folders for that and ask him during the meeting for those. The emails from a handful of people. Mauricio Rosas explained or shared that over Easter, another speeding vehicle crashed through a home in Seminole Heights, and he shared a video clip that he had taken with the homeowner. He also shared a link of Josh Frank's presentation to the Tampa Heights Civic Association entitled "Converting 11 Miles of I-265 into the Future Spine of Tampa Starts with a Conversation." Mauricio learned from DOT staff about a See-Click Fix app that is used extensively in Pinellas for expanding community participation, and he's encouraging the city of Tampa to look into using that. And lastly, from Mauricio, shared an article about students just outside of Boston who convinced their town to install 3D crosswalks at elementary schools and suggested this is a strategy for Vision Zero. Well noted. Got that. Lena Young also emailed, and she just appreciated Smart Growth's Complete Streets policies. Caitlin Rance continues to share her comments for congestion on Sims Road between 41 and 301. Joe Bone from USF College of Public Health wrote thanking Wade for filling in last minute and giving a great presentation to his students. And Eric Goldstein, West Chase Community Association, thanked Beth for taking the time to come and with her busy schedule to address their members, and that they later shared a lot of positive and complimentary comments about the presentation. Thank you. Those are your online comments.
Any questions? Thank you, ma'am. Now move to the consent agenda. We have 2 items on the consent agenda: committee appointments and letter requests by BPAC on parking and bike lanes. We have a motion to approve the consent agenda. Motion by Mechanic and Maniscalco, second by Commissioner Kemp. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, let me know by saying aye. Opposed, likewise. Motion is adopted. We're now moving to action items. Transportation Improvement Program Amendment for HART grants. Good morning.
Good morning. Sarah McKinley, MPO staff. This morning I have 2 Transportation Improvement Program amendments for you. These are both related to HART grants. A little recap: the Transportation Improvement Program is the 5-year work program. Because it is effective from October 1st of every year to September 30th, we are still in the process of processing amendments as we get them in. The first amendment is for the HART Resiliency Grant. This is a state-funded grant that was received. It is $1 million to help with starting to fix and address some of the drainage issues that they have at their 21st Ave location. The second grant is for the HART Transit-Oriented Development grant that we received. This is $800,000 that we've received from Federal Transit Administration, as well as $200,000 in local funds that we'll be utilizing in-kind staff time for that portion. So we are asking that you approve both of these grants. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Are there any questions? I have a motion. Motion by Mr. Mechanic, second by Commissioner Overman, to approve the items of roll call vote.
Klug? Kemp? Mechanic?
Yes.
Gerardo? Green? Hagan? Scherberger? Miller?
Yes.
Vieira? Overman? Maniscalco? Wagner?
Yes.
Smith? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Unified Planning Work Program Amendment. Good morning.
Good morning. Allison Ye, MPO staff. So the amendment you have before you is the amendment to the MPO work program, the Unified Planning Work Program for fiscal year 2019-20. For those who are not familiar with this program, it is a 2-year work program that's effective. This particular one that's effective is from July 1st, 2018, the first fiscal year, to June 30th, 2020, the second fiscal year. This outlines all the major planning tasks in the program that for the MPO and coordinates federal funding between HART, MPO, and the DOT, and it's a necessary document to comply with our federal and state rules. So there are 4 items before you this morning. We are going to do some administrative adjustments to the fiscal year 19 and 20 budget. We're updating the task to the system and quarter planning task and updating the HART planning program. And finally, we're proposing an addition of the Hillsborough County Transportation Improvement Surtax budget, specifically for the portion that of planning the MPO does. This is the administrative portion. So from time to time, we have different workflows. So we plan a budget and we have to make adjustments to it. So this is one of the adjustments. With the long-range plan update, there's a lot of activities going towards planning management, long-range transportation plan, transportation improvements, that's task 1, 3, 4, and 5, the public participation. So we're moving some staff funds that was in task 2, the system quarter planning, into that task. So that's what you're seeing before you. There's no change to the overall budget, just an administrative move. And I'm happy to go over the details with you. For fiscal year 20, this is also an administrative amendment, but really it's truing up of the budget. So for tasks 1, 3, and 5, those tasks that I mentioned that are going towards long-range plan planning, we had administratively, when there's money left over at the end of one UPWP cycles, that would have been 2018, there's money left over that has to be held for a year, and now we're just putting that money back into the budget in fiscal year 20. Also in task 2, there's an increase of about $50,000 from a grant received for the Garden Steps project, as well as a truing up of the transportation disadvantage budget, which amounted to be about $1,600. So, but we need to do this administratively, and that's why the amendment's before you. In task 2 itself, there are some changes. There's one, the $50,000 I mentioned, the grant received from the National Healthiest Cities and Counties Challenge for Garden Steps. There is the addition, just a text addition of the Transportation Equity Scorecard tool. It's something we're trying to partner with Qatar on a grant for. So that's, we're listing that as a potential project. And 3, the update of the TD grant that I mentioned. The other thing that's being proposed and we're seeking guidance from the board on is the addition to task 2 in the corridor area and environmental studies section of the I-275 Boulevard conversion concept. So you heard several times this morning that this was a motion made by CAC and supported by BPAC and TAC as well. For the HART planning program, this is a program that was placed in task 7, the UPWP, but the MPO does not receive any of those funds. So when HART asked us to update this item, we thought that it might be best to move it to the appendix because it still needs to be there for informational purposes, but the MPO has no control over those funds and we don't receive those funds. So you heard Sarah mention earlier the transit-oriented development grant that's been added to that section, $800,000. Also, there's 5307 urbanized area formula grants and $750,000 that's in there for illustrative purpose as well. That doesn't go into the MPO budget at all. So it's in the appendix to the document. Finally, we are proposing adding an Appendix J. That's the proposed budget for the Hillsborough County Transportation Improvements Surtax budget. So this is the 1% MPO share. This is the 1% share of the proceeds, about $2.8 million for the MPO. And should you approve this proposed budget, it would be contingent on resolving any legal challenges that are associated with it. We placed it in the appendix to clarify that this is not subject to state and federal review. These are local funds. And I wanted to point out in this budget, in the $2.8 million, 80% of that is for consultant engineering public input to directly assist HART in the local jurisdictions to implement transportation improvements. And there's some money set aside for personnel because the MPO is responsible for staffing the independent oversight committee, and then just a little bit of funds set aside for equipment. So that's the 4th item that we're proposing. So for today, what the staff is recommending for the amendment is, 1, the adjustments to the fiscal year 19 and 20 budget, the update of task 2 and for the TD section that I mentioned, the update of the HART planning program, and the addition of the Surtax budget for fiscal year 20 that would be contingent upon resolving any legal challenges. Now there is also, this is the part we're seeking guidance on, the committee request from the CAC to add into task 2, the study of the I-275 Boulevard conversion concept. And again, that was supported by BPAC and supported by the TAC. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Commissioner Smith, you recognized.
Sorry.
The BPAC had an additional suggestion. I think that's what I heard from Ms. Torres' presentation on including the boulevard concept. Didn't they ask to, did I hear her saying that they asked to include bicycle pedestrian impacts in that?
I didn't have that
In the
directly, but-
boulevard project study.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
That, I guess that could be amended into the actual language. We were just going to add a line item to task 2, so those things could be part of a project scope. Or you could add it directly into the language as well of the resolution.
right, so yeah, I'll wait to hear any other discussion on that, but if we're moving forward with that, I would like that included.
Okay.
Commissioner Kemp, you recognize. Need the mic.
Thank you. I wanted to make a motion to add that into the Unified Work Program. And second, I'd just like to express a little concern. I know I had some discussion about this, but the position.
Before you move forward, you made a motion to add it into the work program. We need to make a motion to approve it and then add it in one motion. So
Okay.
make the motion
To approve
it
and add it in.
There you go.
Thank you.
That's your motion?
Mhm.
You still second?
Second.
Okay, go ahead.
And the second concern I'd just like to, this is not on the motion, but that just express is that one of the positions that we're looking at adding, should we get the new tax resources, is a community planner for shared mobility services. And I'd just like to express, I really like to see, instead of that, something that was more a transportation equity planner that would look at transportation equity issues as well as transportation disadvantage I'd include in there and others, because I feel like the shared mobility services are something that can be done by private institutions or benefactors that benefit from those services, whatever they may be, and that or whatever places can worry about that kind of planning. So that I just think we have a big need for transportation equity, but I'm just expressing that.
Okay, any further discussion? We have a motion by Commissioner Kemp, second by Commissioner Overman. See no further discussion. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise. Motion is adopted.
Thank you.
Is that it, ma'am?
Yes, thank
Okay, thank you. Annual joint certification of the MPO. Morning.
Morning, board members. Rich Clarendon, Assistant Director of the MPO. Today I'm here to talk to you. I recommend that we jointly certify ourselves as complying with all the federal requirements and state requirements for the MPO. This is something that happens every year about this time, every fourth year. Thank you. We are treated to a site visit from the feds. They come down and spend 2 days pretty much going over everything with us. We did not go through that this time, but we do conduct a fairly thorough performance audit, if you will, making sure that we are covering everything that we need to be covering in compliance with federal and state rules, and this applies to calendar 2018, so it's looking back a year. So very briefly, I'm going to go over some notable achievements, things that we feel are emblematic of the work we do, starting with the It's Time Tampa Bay survey, which you remember from last summer. We were pleased to have something approaching 10,000 responses to this survey. Covered 3 counties, ourselves, Pasco and Pinellas, and generated a record-setting response for this type of survey. So we're very happy about that. It focused on transportation growth and priorities and really is setting the stage for the long-range plan update that you're going to be hearing about more about later in this meeting. Vision Zero is something else that we feel is a notable achievement, and we're pleased that other folks agree with us on that. The MPO, the Florida MPO Advisory Council selected Vision Zero and the action plan as a noteworthy practice. It was pretty much a slam dunk within the state of Florida, and we're getting a lot of requests from other organizations and MPOs to look at this because they're following our lead. It was also recognized by the Florida chapter of the American Planning Association. We were very happy to get a grant from the Federal Highway Administration. This is a discretionary award for what we're calling Resilient Tampa Bay Transportation. This is to look at vulnerability, again, on a tri-county basis, and particularly as it relates to transportation vulnerability to things like sea level rise and inundation due to extreme weather events, and see what we can do to recommend some strategies. It's a bit of a work in progress. We're about halfway through it and expect to have results sometime next year. Something else that we feel is a sort of a best practice that other MPOs could benefit from is the school safety study that you all approved April of last year. This is to look at safety conditions around public schools and recommend selected or improvements on, around a selection of 10, top 10 schools, really bottom 10, and if you look at it in terms of crash histories. Last but not least, the Gulf Coast Safe Streets Summit was something that we did last year, early in the year 2018. This is where we collaborated with 5 other MPOs to really bring together speakers both from a nationwide as well as a local perspective on safety challenges and initiatives, all geared towards safer streets. And again, this was an award-winning initiative recognized by the Regional Planning Council. We did get some recommendations from our partners at District 7 of the Florida DOT, namely to look at our Transportation Improvement Program, which you all have seen many times. And as you may know, it constitutes not only the DOT projects, but also local projects. The local projects are in there primarily for information. However, there is a lot of overlap, particularly, for example, in the HART project, where they're getting federal funding, but we have to recognize, and there's also recognized in the DOT program. Sometimes those are not quite aligned, and we need to take care of that. It's not like we're double counting, but we do need to recognize that there are some duplicate projects and try to eliminate those or at least reconcile them. Also, reviewing our grant invoices. We're 95%, more than 95% funded through state and federal grants. We have to turn around invoices on a quarterly basis. Those are getting scrutinized a lot more, and we need to put into place sort of a quality control process, a second set of eyes before those go out the door. We have not been, thankfully, had any rejected, but we have had some questions raised. So we're going to be looking at those a lot more closely before those get sent out. Last but not least, committee effectiveness and time management. You may have heard Mr. Roberts talk about our robust discussions, and Commissioner Overman knows quite well that we are sometimes there almost until noon at the CAC. I think that is a tribute to the members in terms of their dedication. Is it the best way to use their time? Well, that's up for them to decide, but one thing that we've tried to do, and Commissioner Miller was at the first one, we actually had an evening meeting. Not exactly a happy hour, but we are trying to get together sort of in a more informal basis to allow people to discuss things that are really off the agenda, or maybe in depth, or maybe ask questions that they were reluctant to ask in a formal meeting. So that might cut down a little bit on the time it takes for us to get through our agenda items. So that's just one idea that's been coming forward. We were asked, what can we do to improve our relationship with the DOT? Well, one thing that's come out of the regional best practices, also known as MPO merger study, that we did agree with, and I should just try to dispel, first of all, that we're part of this certification has really nothing to do with merging. That was not part of the recommendation or the findings. However, we did feel like this was one thing we could take from that study and maybe explore a little bit more. And that has to do with the regional modeling process that drives so much of the decision making that goes on in terms of travel demand forecasts. Right now, it's something that DOT manages. We feel like maybe having a co-chair from an MPO staff member who reports to the MPO directors on a monthly basis might not be a bad thing. So that was one thing that we did take from that study that we feel like has some merit. Corrective actions, I'm pleased to say there were none. So what we're asking you today to do is to support recertification of the MPO and authorize your chairman to sign the certification statement.
Are there any questions? Is there a Second. We have a motion by Commissioner Kemp, second by Commissioner Maniscalco. Is there any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. So, the comment was earlier to discuss the MPO merger study. Obviously, it's in there, in the report. We've had conversation about it, and it's the work that's been done. But I'm curious about whether or not by accepting the report, we're accepting the recommendations to merge the MPO. I mean, it's just a question.
No, I don't think so.
I want to make sure it's clear. That's not what we're doing.
Hitting the wrong button. Thank you. Thanks. And so just to clarify, this isn't any kind of action about the merger study. That report went to the TBARTA board and they closed out that task. So all we're doing here is going through our annual review process and looking at opportunities to improve our transportation planning process. And that was one recommendation out of the regional study that we thought was worthwhile and we should try to move forward with.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Smith, you recognized.
Thank you. The slide about the recommendations, the top item, eliminate duplicate projects and funding from the TIP. Can you explain that a little bit more? What kind of duplicate projects?
Sure. I'll try to, for example, there may be an FTA, Federal Transit Administration grant that comes to HART, for example. They describe it one way. And maybe it's prospective in the sense that they haven't actually received the grant, so the dollar amounts might not be exactly aligned with the same project that also shows up in the DOT work program, maybe described a little bit differently, perhaps with slightly different funding. We have to make sure those are identified and reconciled. That's all it is.
Thank you.
Any further? Yeah, Mayor Gerardo.
But, Keenan.
I think when you're ready, you're good to go. Nice.
Thank you. And following up on Commissioner Smith, so is where my interest is. So around the duplicate projects and funding, and it has been a discussion item on this board as we look at a study and say, didn't we just hear about that 2 months ago? Well, it's slightly different. So, Rich, what has the staff identified as your action step to communicate or take a corrective action that allows this board to know where duplicate projects are happening before we make decisions on funding further projects?
So this has to do with the Transportation Improvement Program. It really has nothing to do with MPO studies per se. So the example I gave about the projects that might show up, a project that might show up in the HART section of the Transportation Improvement Program might be for an infrastructure improvement. An example might be the TIP amendment you had today where they were receiving a special grant from FTA regarding drainage improvements at their 21st Avenue operating base. That might show up in their work program, and it also shows up in the DOT work program. We just have to make sure that it's described the same in both places.
Any other questions? We have a motion by Commissioner Kemp, second by Councilman Maniscalco. All those in favor, let me know by saying aye. Aye. Opposed likewise. Motion is adopted. Moving to status reports. Tampa Bay next update. Morning, Mr. Secretary.
Good morning. David Gwynn, District Secretary, FDOT. If I can get you to help me pull up this presentation here. Not sure which one it is. Well, good morning. I'm here today to give you an update on Tampa Bay Next. We have a lot of activities coming up in the next couple of months, and so I think it's a good time to give you an update on not just some of the things we've actually got going on in terms of projects moving forward, but also some of the direction we're taking as we go forward into some of our longer-term projects that are reaching certain milestones. Most of you probably know by now that the Howard Franklin Bridge is under procurement. We anticipate selecting a contractor design-build team later this year with construction starting next year. We expect that the project will be completed by 2024. So one of the things that we'll be doing, of course, is replacing the currently structurally deficient bridge with a new bridge that will include 4 general purpose lanes and 2 express lanes in each direction. We're also going to be building a reinforcing portion of the bridge that will allow for future light rail should that become something in the future that becomes a desire that's expressed to go between Pinellas and Hillsborough County. We also, as you know, at the request of both the Hillsborough and Pinellas MPOs, added a multi-use path across the bridge that will allow for pedestrian and bicycle traffic to go across the bridge. And we also were asked to look at aesthetics. What is it going to look like when you go across this bridge? Is there going to be, it's a pretty long way, is there a place for people to stop? Is there some shade if we need, or we'll want to put some things out there for water and bike repair? So we did add that into the contract. The enhancements will include arrival features at either end, as well as 4 overlook locations that will be more or less to provide resting areas, shade. If there's rain, folks hopefully can provide a little bit of shelter. Wanted to tell you a little bit more about that today, and also tell you how we're going to get to what those might look like. So really there were 2 concepts that were developed by a team that looked at this. We tried to follow the sail concept, which was what was developed as we went through the project through the Dale Mabry area. You'll notice there's sail features out there. So we said, let's try to stay somewhat consistent with that. It does provide a continuity of experience, if you would, as you go through, which was something we were asked to consider. It also provides an entrance feature for both Pinellas and Hillsborough County as you're coming on and off the bridge to be able to see that, especially for folks that aren't from the area. Now, the design-build teams will provide their interpretation of these concepts. So they'll bring back ideas that they are going to be scored upon that will be providing these themes and how we build them into it. The overlooks will also include areas for bike racks. But after a contract is awarded, the design-build team will refine the concepts in early to mid-2020. We will confirm that they are both constructible and meet the requirements in the design criteria, and then we'll launch what we're going to call a regional public vote. We'll have concepts, we'll put it out for folks to vote on, and then hopefully we'll at the end have a really nice looking feature for each of the overlooks as well as the entrance and exits of the bridge. So more on that will be coming up, but we hope that we're going to have a really good design concept or a couple to pick from, and the community will enjoy that. Getting into the SEIS, as you know, we're kind of going into the latter stages of the SEIS. We have the public workshops coming up May 21st and 23rd, one in West Shore and the other in Ybor City. At that point, we'll be showing all of the documents that we've prepared so far. So all of the studies of the various elements of the SEIS will be available. And we'll also be, at that point, be able to work with community members that want to discuss particular items, see all of the concepts. I think you'll find that we have a lot more graphical representation of the concepts, 3D renderings and fly-throughs that people will be able to visualize much better what each concept is. And I think that's something that is taking a lot of time to get those put together, but I think it'll be a big benefit to people. We also expect then to have a public hearing right after the beginning of the year in 2020, where we'll come forth with the preferred concepts, and we'll be able to at that point accept public input in a public hearing format. So a lot of this you already know. What are we considering? Really, we're looking at no further action. We're looking at the 1996 Tampa Interstate Study, which was the basis of the SEIS, and then we're looking at tolled express lanes, both in the West Shore area as well as in the downtown interchange area. For the West Shore interchange, the full reconstruction of the interchange will bring it to modern standards and provide throughput needed for traffic demand. The proposal that we're showing is very similar to what was shown in the Tampa Interstate study in terms of the footprint of the interchange. This has gained pretty much unanimous support from all of the local agencies, both transportation agencies, the airport, the port, a lot of the other folks, both in Hillsborough County and in adjacent counties. And so this has really been the one project that's gained a lot of support. We're working with FHWA right now to try to find a way to push this project forward at a different pace than we are looking at the downtown interchange. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about that as we get a little further into the presentation. Some of the other things this project would do in addition to just providing interstate capacity is it does provide a lot more connectivity in the community. We'll have improvements to local streets that will include connecting Occident, Rio, and Trask streets under I-275. As you know, it's not very easy to go across 275 in that area. This will provide more opportunities and help with local traffic circulation as well as transit opportunities. Also, there'll be new connections from Rio Street to I-275. And the configuration at the Rio Street interchange will be a diverging diamond interchange. And I think that'll work very well in that area. As far as transit benefits, transit will also see benefits with the interchange project. The corridor and the median is being preserved on the median of 275, and it does not preclude future rail to the airport. The local reconnections will help with the first mile, last mile transit issue that a lot of the riders face. And lastly, buses can operate free in the express lanes. This creates reliable travel times for transit riders in the managed lanes. And on the map, I know it may be hard for you to see, but the green lines, green arrows up there show where the new connections would be. For the I-275 I-4 interchange, we have developed 4 concepts. 2 of them are similar to what was in the original Tampa Interstate study, had the larger footprint and provided much more capacity to the interchange. The other 2 have much smaller impacts and footprints, but they provide primarily express lane connectivity and capacity. Does not really add capacity in the general purpose lanes. The cost for these in options A and B, which are the larger ones, run anywhere from about $1.5 to $1.75 billion. The C and D estimates are about 1.1 to 1.2 billion. Those projects are all, as you know, ones that we're getting a lot of public input on and we're considering very strong. So the interstate SEIS documentation that will be presented and prepared for folks to look at include the socio-cultural effects, the natural physical effects, the engineering considerations, and public output. The draft documents performed to date will be available for review at the public hearing and on our work website following the workshop. Again, FDOT is hosting the public workshops this month. We encourage you to learn more and to also attend. But you can go to the tampainterstatestudy.com for additional project information and materials for this project workshop, and other project details will be posted there. Really, we're getting towards the point where we're going to be having to make a decision. And so really, that was the presentation that staff prepared for me to deliver to give you the basic facts about the project. What I did want to do was to talk to you a little bit about what are we really trying to do? What is FDOT trying to do? And what are we not looking to do right now? So that hopefully it can help as we encourage dialogue in different areas to know what we're pushing for and what we're not. What we are trying to do is we're trying to get approval to start getting the funding in place to build the West Shore interchange. It's a much needed improvement. We've gotten so much support for the project, but we need a lot of money. And in order to go to Tallahassee to get the money, I need to have an approved SEIS. What we're not trying to do is push any significant improvements in the downtown interchange. That's not a top priority. It's not on our radar right now to do that. However, FHWA at this point is requiring us to make decisions on both of the interchanges concurrently in the same SEIS in order to gain approval. I am working very closely with them to try to find a way to separate the two, to get it where we can approve West Shore and say, you know what, let's put downtown interchange to decide. We don't know exactly where Bright Line is going to go. We've got other things that the community, wants to do with transit and other things that maybe if we're going to push this down the road 10 years, at that point, who knows if we want to look at this project? Who knows what we want to do? But why is now the time to make a decision when we don't have the money and we don't have on the DOT end that on the top of our list? That's something we're working through. I'm not sure if we'll be able to separate the two, and if not, we'll have to make a decision on both in order to get one to go forward. Now, does that say we don't want to do anything at all for the downtown interchange? No, that's not entirely true. What I don't want to do is what we promised not to do, which was to put express lanes on 275 North. We've taken those out. We don't plan to try to put those back in. We do want to address the safety problem. I think the last year we had data for, there was about 1,500 crashes in the downtown interchange. It's not getting better. What I've heard and what I've seen with my own eyes is one of the biggest problems that we have is the movement that goes from I-275 southbound to go onto I-4, and the movement from I-4 westbound to go northbound on 275. We have found a way to be able to put those 2 lanes in each direction, put in a new 2-lane bridge. We had to work out how it was going to be received on I-4. That was the big problem. We always could fit a 2-lane bridge. It was how do we get it back in and still deal with people being able to access 14th and 15th and the interchange there. And through a lot of creative design, we were able to find a way to do it and provide those 2 movements within the existing right-of-way. We won't need any more right-of-way. In order to do that, though, if you ever come down 275 coming southbound and you try to get over to get into the lane to go to I-4, you got to go past MLK before you can even move over. And by then, there's people backed up in there, and you can't get over, and they're trying to get. We need to extend that widening further north. We need to go at least to Hillsborough, because if we don't go past Hillsborough, we don't get the ability to put those 2 lanes in a place that people that don't want to go on I-4 have a way to get over into the lanes that they need to be in to keep going south. For many years, I drove from Bears Avenue in the morning to go to West Shore, and I sat in traffic, jammed up from Fletcher to Hillsborough, and when I got to Hillsborough, it was, if I didn't want to go to I-4, it was like I can go at 60 miles an hour. It was getting that worked out in the Hillsborough Avenue interchange area that we needed to work on. So that's something that we do want to look to move forward. But I would say if segment 7 is removed from the tip and I send that money back to Tallahassee, which is not going to come back to us, it's going to go somewhere else. One, it's going to make it very hard for us to get that interchange improvement lined up. Second, it really hurts my argument to look for the West Shore money, which is over $1 billion. And so I understand there's a lot of desire to look at the boulevard. We are not opposed to doing, if you want to do a study for the boulevard, we're not opposed to that. What I would encourage you to do, if you do a study on that, because it would be an extremely complicated process, I would encourage you to engage FHWA before you determine what the study entails. I'd also ask you to consider involving other regional partners in the study. I-275, it's a regional facility. And we know that we need to consider other regional partners who may have a thought on it. It is one of the top priorities for the TMA. And so, and I'm saying that not because I'm saying you should invite people in that may not have the same idea you have. What I'm saying is eventually you're going to be told that you have to involve those folks. And so why not do it early? Just something to throw in there. It would be a study that you would do. But I say FHWA is going to have the final say on if you're able to do what you want to do with the interstate at some point. And it's good to know what they want early than it is to do $1 million study or however much it might be and then find out you just spent a lot of money and didn't really do what you needed to do in order to get the major decision maker to be on board. We also just wanted to, the segment 6, I know, I guess you're going to kind of have to take our word for it. We don't, the 4 alternatives you see up there for the downtown interchange, we have no intention at this point of trying to push those forward. It's just not, we don't have the money, it's not the right thing to do. And so, although we may have to make a decision on it, I do want you to know that's not what we're pushing to do. One operational improvement is something we would look at, but we're not looking to go in there and blow that interchange out. I can tell you we're also putting a lot more money into things like safety. We're doing a lot of projects off the interstate, so the Tampa Bay Next is not just an interstate program. We can't ignore the interstate. We got to do things to help the interstate for regional travel, but we also are focusing more on off the interstate as well. So with all that, I just wanted to get you up to date on both the, I guess, the formal presentation and the things we're doing that may not be as evident day to day, and open it up to any questions that you may have.
Mr. Secretary, thank you for your presentation. Appreciate it very much. Commissioner Overman, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. You've done an excellent job of helping us understand how complicated it can be. As you heard earlier, we're very interested in supporting the idea of investigating the boulevard concept, as it will also impact, the downtown interchange. And I'm never a big fan of spending money and then having to spend it again and then spend it again. So I do understand that. I also understand the complexity of the SCIS and why that timing is challenging. And while I do want to see the West Shore project move forward, I am concerned about the communities that would, and the taxpayer dollars that would go towards a project that we just have to redo later on down the road. But as a person who will not get on the interstate at MLK because it literally is a deathly experience trying to get across 3 lanes of traffic just to go through instead of go to I-4, I do appreciate the challenges in that particular area. I do recognize there is a huge safety risk, and I do also recognize that the roller coaster ride that the interstate is at that point oftentimes is one of the largest contributors because the line of sight isn't good. When you mentioned solving that problem and adding a lane, did that include between the interchange and Sly or MLK widening in that particular area? Is that
within
what
the
I
existing
understood you to
right-of-way?
say?
Within the existing right-of-way.
Within the
yeah.
existing right-of-way.
We can do everything that we would need to do within the existing right. That was one of the commitments we made, so we've been able to do that. Now, will there be more pavement out there? There will be some more pavement. There will also be noise walls. We'll put noise walls the whole way that we end up putting any new pavement out there. But we would have to take those lanes further north because right now there's no way to get to them.
I'm just curious because it is 2 lanes of traffic at MLK going to I-4. That backs up or people are dodging in front of each other. So I was curious if you have those 2 lanes, will it go beyond, will it go with the 2-lane indicator go to like Hillsborough? Because that's where it starts to back up, and
Right.
you literally, I don't know how people are planning on getting onto MLK, at MLK, but that's, if we were going to close an exit, I wouldn't do Floor Basket. Not that you want to close MLK, but that one is a very dysfunctional on-ramp.
Yeah.
So how would you address that on-ramp on that particular configuration that you're describing?
Yeah.
I saw the plan a little bit, but I didn't see that element associated with it.
Yeah, there's a number of operational improvements that also will be included along this route at Hillsborough at MLK, where we lengthen the weave and merge distances that are out there, and in some cases we can actually eliminate them by putting an additional auxiliary lane on the outside. Is it ever going to be perfect? No, it's not going to be like a Interstate 10 up in the Panhandle where you can get on and you got miles before the next interchange. We got complex traffic patterns, but this project would eliminate a lot of those problem points where we get a lot of the crashes and where we get the congestion points. But it does require additional pavement because that's where, if we can get the people that want to go to I-4 in those right 2 lanes back far enough that they don't impede the traffic that wants to go to downtown or to go further to the south. All that traffic now that I think is backed up from Hillsborough all the way up to Fletcher will have a path to get through because those folks from now that are causing all the turbulence will be in the lanes that they should be in that don't exist today.
Right.
So that's why we have to take it back far enough to make it where it just doesn't push the merging problem back. We'd also be underneath at a lot of the interchanges, we'd be doing improvements to increase the width underneath. Not for more vehicles for the most part, but for providing better opportunities for bicycle pedestrian types of features underneath the bridges. A lot of the complaints we got was that with those slope walls, it's very tight sidewalk. This would allow us to make better, I think a better community feature underneath the bridges.
Well, yeah, it'll open it up for visual because it is so dark underneath there frequently.
Right.
Even during the daytime, it's not an attractive place to be.
Right.
So thank you for your answers to those questions. The other issue is what you brought up with as far as the Boulevard project and the regionality associated with that. Clearly, if we put that study as a priority, can it be slid into your SEIS project, or is it too late to actually include that as part of the consideration?
Well, it's outside the SEIS except for a little tiny piece of it, so it really wouldn't be part of the SEIS. Quite honestly, if the Boulevard was, your first step is going to be some sort of a feasibility study to determine what do you have to do if you want to do this. And I won't try to oversimplify it, but you're going to say this is one of the things you'll look at is this is the kind of capacity I have today that moves freight, that moves vehicles, that move in this corridor, and what am I going to do in order to mitigate if I say now, if I go to a boulevard, now I have this level of capacity. So it may be that you have to say I have to look at Florida Avenue, I need to look at Dale Mabry, I need to look at other roads that are parallel that could serve as or it may be that you look at a whole new road. I don't know. That's all part of the initial study, but it's a very broad brushed, how do we get people through this corridor, because FHWA is going to want to ask you, we paid how many ever billions of dollars over the years to build this interstate, and you want to tear it down to convince us that we shouldn't ask you for the money back, which is what they could technically do. And then they're also going to ask for a finance plan for how you're going to do it. How are you going to come up with the money to do this? Because when you look at, when I looked at the Boulevard concept, and I know it was just kind of a picture, but when I looked at it, it had rail, it had bus lanes, it had, it's not like we're going to close it down for the weekend and the next weekend it's going to be, how are you going to do that? All of that's going to be part of this. And that's why I'm saying it could be, I don't want to discourage anybody, but to get through that process in less than, because then you'd have to go into a PD&E process, and then you'd have to go through, you're talking a long time. And that's why I hate to say we should put everything off waiting for this to happen. It could be 10, 20 years before you would be able to get through everything that you need to try to do, not the least being if you're going to have all these transit corridors in there, how are you going to do that? All these things need to be put in place before you're going to get FHWA to say, yeah, let's go ahead and start talking about tearing down this road. You're also going to have to look at things like evacuation routes. How are you going to handle evacuation? There's just a lot of things. And I'm not, believe me, FHWA sometimes is as much a nemesis to us as they are to any. It's just part of the process, though. They are doing their job. They're wanting to make sure that before they approve something, they know that everything is ready to go. Mm-hmm. And so by not doing an interim project, I think you're throwing away a lot. When you look at just the benefit to cost of all the safety improvements that you'd have, I'd hate to send that money back.
Oh, absolutely. That's not my goal either. So we do have a variety of other studies that are in the works. We have the HART is doing its BRT study with Florida and Nebraska, and the state is doing the mobility project that's running in concert, all in that same area. Which is why I'm thinking, well, if we're going to be doing all of that and looking at that, how does that play a part in what we're looking at as far as the boulevard concept? And of course, HART is doing the starting the research and discussing the effort to purchase the CSX lines in that area to be able to provide rail service. That is, in fact, the best catalyst, in my opinion, towards a regional plan. To really help people get around when you really look at where the rails are and how it connects with all the counties around us. Right. As a great resource that we haven't really explored to the extent that I'd like to see. So I appreciate that effort. Obviously, we need to get West Shore moving forward, so I understand where you are as far as the plan is concerned. I just don't want to see a whole lot movement on the downtown interchange until we address some of those other issues.
That's not on our priority list right now.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kemp, you recognized.
Thank you. Thanks for all that information. That's good. And I'm glad you emphasized some things that, because this morning we heard about how it was misery on I-275, but I drive it every single morning. I can tell you, you get on at MLK. I'm in Hillsborough, right? But I know that, you know, I've driven it for 30 years between 7 and 9 in the morning, and it's I'm not going to I-4, so it's open road unless there's an accident or something. There is never any. It's like amazing how congestion-free it is. And maybe, yeah, and even when I went to Blake High School for 6 years with my kids, it was just like this expensive, incredible roadway was built just for me, I felt almost. It was pretty exclusive use, which I thought was kind of amazing. But in the afternoons, there is congestion as you come back. I guess having experienced congestion in the DC area, it seems not, you know, not so intense here, but I know there's lots of pressure about that. The other thing is just again to acknowledge, because I think it's important for people to keep in their minds, but some of the traffic on I-275, and it's under capacity, as I understand, like for many years to come, north of Fletcher out, which I think people don't realize. The other thing is that the other section of it, as I understand, it's something like 60% of it is local traffic, where people are going between the exits north of downtown or to downtown from those exits. I kind of remember hearing that calculation somewhere too.
I think what I remember seeing was some calculations that I don't think it didn't appear that it was like typically when you try to do that, you do an origin destination study, which is you find ways to determine where cars started and ended. I think what I saw was some kind of what I consider to be a sketch level type calculations. It was not something I would stand behind and say I believe that, but it's like it's a first step. You look at it. I don't know what the traffic is north of Bears, but all that traffic is coming in from somewhere else.
Right.
So at least that amount of traffic is not local traffic.
Right.
Yeah,
so maybe we could do something like that too, an origin and destination study to kind of figure that out with, I'm just thinking about the way that works.
I think that would be part of your boulevard study.
Feasibility thing.
Figure out where people are coming, going, so that you can better identify the impacts. Yeah.
And I would just like to say, I know it's important now to be talking about the TIP and the CIS, and at this point, and I do appreciate that you all, I think it's pretty, something that's just been done in the last few years is to have FDOT here every quarter, I think. And I just was, I'd be interested in just trying to figure out how we could do something where we would be not just talking about the CIS, but looking more wholly at some other projects under FDOT. And I say this just because I've been thinking about this with Vision Zero and all the arterial roads that FDOT has. And I think we don't focus or learn about them enough sometimes about how we can move forward. And I've been trying to also connect the Vision Zero to the improvements that are being done. It's as much as I try, it's hard for me to follow and know and understand. And the other night I was coming back from the Pepin Center across Hillsborough Avenue to Seminole Heights, driving west. And it was about 10 o'clock at night, and around 40th Street, there's a crosswalk there, and it was very dark. It's totally unlit there. I was kind of surprised, and I was coming across normal. Like I looked at my speedometer at the time, and I was exactly at the speed limit when I was coming across, and two people were trying to cross that crosswalk, and one was dressed dark and one was dressed in white, but they were hobbling across very slowly, having difficulty getting across, maybe older. And they went very slowly, and I hit my brakes, and several other people hit their brakes. It was like there's no flashing beacons there, there's no lights there, and it was really difficult. And then I looked on that map tool we have, the Vision Zero, and it's kind of amazing to see the fatalities, and it goes in this straight line across Hillsborough Avenue, and you can bring up what those are. I was thinking about maybe connecting and showing people, as a focus, maybe some parts of that map as we go forward, and then FDOT could talk or walk us through some of the projects that are being done there. I think that might make it something that would help people to understand how what FDOT's doing, but also how we move forward in making those streets safe. And as long as I'm just had that experience, I don't know how quickly, but it really is totally dark, and it was very scary. And they came very close to being either hit by me or someone else, because they were just impossible to see until you got right up on them, and that's obeying all the speed limits and everything there.
We'd be glad to put together some presentations give to you on, because we do have a lot. Right now, we're doing a lot of lighting projects. State allocated $100 million a couple years ago for lighting, and it just takes time working with the power companies and all to get those implemented. But we're working real hard. Hopefully, you've seen a lot of intersections recently that are a lot brighter than they used to be.
They're a lot better.
So we looked at our top corridors, and we also added district money in on top of the money we got from central office. And we work with the MPO to prioritize some of these. And in fact, Beth and I gave a presentation Monday on Bush Boulevard, some projects we're going to do out there that hopefully we're going to be able to lower the speed limit and put some improvements out that will make people feel like they should drive slower. And then also put some of these hawks and RFBs, the things that you see now that will let you know, like you have on Fletcher where it tells you people are crossing, and the hawks will actually make you stop. Like a signal. So we got a lot going on, but we probably could do a better job of communicating to you what those are.
And maybe if that place could be looked at right straight away for beacons and lights.
That was on 40th and Hillsborough?
Yeah, 40th and Hillsborough, about there.
Well, let me say this. It's not only 40th and Hillsborough. From Nebraska to 56th Street.
Right. I was just giving an example here.
Welcome to District 3.
Right.
It's bad, and most of that is not DOT's fault. They're working with the electric company, the utility company, to get that done. But that's just one of many major thoroughfares in the district that I represent that are dark. I mean, and some of them are so dark it's absolutely ridiculous.
I agree.
And it's not only FDOT. Some of it's county responsibility. A lot of it's the city responsibility, and they have to work with the utilities. And around in my neighborhood, off of Martin Luther King and 26th Street, it is really dark. There are street lights there, but Tico says those are the best lights we need to put in that area. I'm not an engineer, but that's stupid, as dark as they are. I hope not to get back to Tico, but that's okay. But that's something that's in that area, the inner city, that we have to face day in and day out. Those dark thoroughfares, and when you get off the major thoroughfares to some mid thoroughfares, it is really, really dark. But I understand that you're trying your very best to do that, but a lot of it's not your responsibility. A lot of it falls within the city limits. A lot of it falls on our county roads. And I know the staff with the FDOT and the county commission and the city of Tampa has been working with the utilities to try to get those things done. A lot of the money's not there.
But maybe we can at least put it here on our agenda as something that we could look forward to. And I do have a street light across the street from me that they repaired after a year being out in my house, only my house. The rest of the neighborhood's dark. My front yard's in pure daylight, to my irritation. But
because you got the new LED lights.
They fix your street light.
It's across the street from me. Nobody else's house is lit up.
Commissioner Kim's fish light. Nobody else.
I didn't ask for it. It's really. I've called the power company and said I think the light shield fell off or something.
Secretary, I'm sorry, Commissioner Smith, you recognize.
Thank you. And I also would enjoy to have more information on the other FDOT projects and especially Vision Zero. So count me on that. I really appreciate your clearly listening to the community and working with us and trying to see how we can best separate the West Shore and downtown interchange projects from the funding request that's really shows that you're working hard with this community, and I just want to express my appreciation of that. I have just a few questions. The study crosstown, the study timeline that you showed on the slide is different than what I had seen before. The slide that you had with the arrows of where we are at the public workshop is I guess where we are going from here.
Here?
Yes, there you go.
Okay.
And the SEIS limits, whoops, there. It shows an envelope along the crosstown that I hadn't seen on the SEIS limits there.
Yeah, that's already been built. That was part of the original Tampa Interstate study. And so even though it's included, it's already built, so we don't have to do anything with it. It's just that was, when you reevaluate a study, the basis is the original study, and it's just that's already been built.
Okay, when I saw that slide, I said, is there something
No.
going on there? Okay, thank you. And then the slide, as regards the 4 downtown interchange alternatives, it doesn't matter about the slide. The ones that have express lanes, they're all indicated to be tolled. Is there going to be any opportunity to consider whether or not those express lanes are tolled?
We're evaluating that as part of, that's, the original alternative was a non-tolled.
Uh-huh.
And so we are looking at that.
Still looking at non-tolled or
Yes,
tolled?
we'll look at both.
Okay, and thank you. And the last thing I'm concerned of, and I know others have mentioned this too, is the issue of environmental justice and social equity, and you didn't get to that in your presentation, but I know that FDOT has pulled some case studies showing that the tolling of express lanes would not unduly or affect low-income or minority populations. It wouldn't have unequal impacts, and that is so counterintuitive to think that what we're calling Lexus lanes in some quarters wouldn't be impacting people who don't drive Lexuses or
Well, you can use it.
Just a little joke. The point is that I think the CAC has recommended doing additional study on that, having a consultant, maybe USF, do some further study on what the impacts of tolling those lanes would be in our area. And of course, it's been mentioned that there's some legal risk with Title VI involved in that. So I think it would behoove us to be careful and to include extra study on that. Is that a possibility?
I can go back and see where we stand on the final study of that. I know, there's two sides of it. If you manage the express lanes, it then becomes a reasonable transit corridor, because you can keep the speeds at a reasonable manner and hopefully encourage people to use transit, and that may benefit people who are lesser income. So I'd have to go back and see exactly how. There's a pretty prescribed process you follow when you're doing these studies, but I'll check. By making them non-tolled, what you end up doing is they all become congested because we can't build enough lanes. You're creating a reliable travel time corridor within a congested environment for the most part.
I understand. I'm on the non-tolling side anyway.
Yeah.
But particularly, I think we should study the impacts on in terms of equity and environmental justice.
Yep. Okay.
Okay. That's it?
All right, thank you.
Sir. 2045 plan needs assessment for major projects.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, board members. Wally Blaine with Tyndale Oliver, one of your consultants that's helping your staff out with the long-range transportation plan and the needs assessment. Real quickly, just wanted to kind of go over what is the long-range transportation plan, just a couple bullets to kind of make sure we're all on the same page and up to speed with this. It is kind of a blueprint. We've talked a little bit about growth. We've talked about where we'll be, and kind of setting the blueprint is a part of answering that question of where we'll be by saying how will we get there, what is our course of action for getting there. It really is not a wish list of projects, but it is kind of vetted through in a reasonable expectation of what is need, both to address the transportation needs of today's population, but also the expectations of growth of people and jobs in the future. It is a federally prescribed planning process that looks at federal spending of revenues over time, but also looks at what are your local revenues that you have available, what are your local planning processes that are in place. It is created through significant public input. You heard through your certification presentation this morning about the regional activity that took place earlier this year, looking at the regional growth scenarios. There'll be additional public involvement for vetting of these needs and getting through the cost feasible plan. You, as the MPO board members, are responsible for approving the plan that's brought before you in the end. And then ultimately that has a plan for implementation that kind of flows through the Transportation Improvement Program and the work program developed by DOT and your partnering agencies. So we do look at kind of these three big steps of how much we'll grow and where we'll grow, and that was what was done through that regional growth scenarios process. What we're in now, kind of that middle step, is answering the what question, what facilities will be needed, and I'll spend the presentation time talking about that. Ultimately, then that leads to the next step of the who, what, and when kind of questions about what gets done and when it gets done and who's responsible for that as part of the cost feasible plan. So looking at the growth forecasts that were done, this is the result of that regional scenario, developed the hybrid growth scenario looking at population and jobs. And the growth numbers that are shown here of about 650,000 more people, 400,000 more jobs is about 45, almost 50% growth over what you have today as jobs and population. And you can see that map on the right kind of is a graphic depiction of the concentration of the result of that. This isn't to say this is where the growth will happen, but this is where we would expect concentrations of jobs and population to be. So as we develop transportation projects, we're looking at those areas and trying to satisfy those needs. You have a program in place that looks at really 5 categories of identifying transportation projects. The first 4 programs here came through as part of your State of the System report. You're getting existing conditions data on that. This is a piece that you'll get some more information as far as that needs assessment goes back in the August board meeting coming up. But those are looking at good repair and resilience. How are we maintaining our transportation system? Looking at Vision Zero, what are we doing to address the safety concerns that are out there? Smart cities, how are we taking technology and using that to benefit our travel corridors as well as our intersection operational conditions. And then real choices, what are we providing for people that don't want to drive or are not able to drive, don't have access to vehicles? How are we providing opportunities for them to move around and gain access to employment and activities through in 2045? The second part is really what I'll focus on today, and that's the major capacity projects, those major investment projects that look at addressing more regional connections. And so we've talked about, you just heard from DOT, the expansion of the interstate, what that means for road capacity projects, as well as coordinating through your transit plans for fixed guideway connections, even regional connections with the MPO's planning partners, or even possibly water ferry transportation across the bay. So looking at that, one of the first things we want to do is identify, well, where are our needs? So we take through the regional travel demand model. It puts all the growth factors in there for the 5-county region that reaches from Hillsborough all the way up to Citrus County. Looks at what's programmed for transportation projects in your transportation improvement program as well as your other MPO partners, and says if we continue to grow and we don't add anything else beyond that, where are we likely to have problems? And you can see as these lines go from orange through red, we have a lot of capacity or congestion issues, and so that kind of becomes a screening for what we would say are failed roads. We've got more traffic that we're trying to shove through the container that we all know is a challenge to today. But we can't address all of those needs. That becomes our wish list. That becomes really unattainable from a funding and a financing perspective. So we'll be screening these and looking at the most critical corridors and evaluating through updates of the travel demand model where we gain the best benefit from specific projects in order to prioritize and rank those needs. And again, that's more detail to come back. This is really just kind of an entrance into this, a lot of technical detail. So we want to come to you in a couple of times and present it to you over time. So looking at those congestion needs and as well as mobility needs of the community, there isn't one solution that's going to address all of the needs of the region of Hillsborough County's residents. So we want to make sure that we're addressing those needs in specific areas. So some of that is roadway widening and expansion. Some of that is right-sizing the roads in the urban core, making sure that we're not just singly focused on auto travel, but we're looking at mobility needs of the community and providing the right transportation solutions. Looking at upgrading and reconstructing some of the interchanges as well as adding new interchanges in certain growth areas. Addressing what the fixed guideway transit recommendations are. The long-range plan for the MPO is updated every 5 years. These are concepts that have been in the long-range plan for many iterations, but certainly now with the potential of the new revenue source, that's a more realistic opportunity for Hillsborough County to look at what some of those fixed guideway transit corridors may look like. All of this, again, is evaluated through the regional travel demand model. It's updated with the updates of the long-range transportation plan. The growth forecasts that you have are in there. And so we're utilizing that tool to the best of its ability to help us identify those decision-making points. So if I walk through just some of the sub areas of the county and give you a taste of kind of the strategies that are in place, we think about kind of the I-4 corridor around the I-75 interchange, Seffner, Thona to Sass area, looking at expanded and widening of roadways, also thinking about new corridor connections. You think about that Hannah corridor that's north of Hillsborough, extending that, connecting that across the Sly Avenue corridor, potentially across the Tampa Bay Bypass Canal, connecting over to 579 or Williams Road on the East 75, really provides a local corridor for access instead of all the traffic trying to be on those major regional corridors. Again, looking for opportunities, what is the best way to address some of those needs, and how we address it through parallel corridors, even out in the Seffner, Thona to Sass area, north of I-4, making some more of those connections that may be substandard connections today, bringing those up to better standards for making connections. Moving into the urban core, a lot of this is about right-sizing the roads in the urban core, adjusting it to make sure we're enhancing walking and biking connections, calming traffic as well. And so what's being tested are some of these things that if we move from a 4-lane corridor down to 3 lanes, maybe a center turn lane or some kind of concept, we're still providing access, but we can provide within the same footprint of the roadway non-auto options, if you would. As well as some other things from going from 8 lanes down to 6 lanes. So looking at different strategies in the appropriate corridors. Moving down to South County, the portion of the county that's projected to experience the most growth. Currently, you're experiencing the most growth now with the development that's happening on there. That also means that there's a lot of congestion on that I-75 corridor as well as 301, 41 corridors heading down there. So there are a lot of new roads that are being tested. A lot of those become contributions or requirements through the development approval process, coordinating that as well, but also looking at those interchange improvements on places like Big Bend Road, Gibsonton Road, and even up to the Martin Luther King interchange on I-75. Moving up to the northwest part of the county, you won't see many projects at all. There's the continuation of projects that have been ongoing for a while with the widening of Lutz Lake Fern, as well as the Citrus Park extension are in there. But outside of that, really, you don't see a lot of capacity projects in the northwest area, primarily to preserve that rural character. But as well, when you look at the map on here, not expected to be a high growth area as well. Similarly, in Plant City, especially on the east side and the northeast Plant side, the land use work that's happened with the Northeast Plant City Master Plan, acknowledging those east-west connections from 39 over to the Polk County line, but then also south of I-4 with the industrial growth that's planned, those connections that would make, those roadway corridors that would make connection over to County Line Road to address the needs of the growth out there. There are several interchanges. I mentioned some of those. Just kind of a map out here to show you where there are some considerations for interchanges that are being looked at countywide. Some of those are hotspot congestion locations, reconfiguring interchanges along the interstate, but also making sure that we're addressing not just our motorists that are on the road, but the needs and the considerations of freight when you consider your performance measures for freight reliability, tying that back to addressing the freight needs. And then finally, those fixed guideway corridors. Again, this is consistent with what's been in the long-range transportation plan before, looking at what those connections might be in those different corridors. Technology neutral at this point in time. We'll bringing back additional information in the coming months about some different cost options and bring more of that to you to make a decision on those fixed guideway corridors. But certainly some of the things that you've discussed today, that CSX corridor running up along US 41 into Pasco, as well as the connection over into Pinellas across the Howard Franklin Bridge, being consistent with what the planning activities have been up to this point. Speaking of consistency, the Planning Commission, and you've got a memo in your packet that talks about the Planning Commission's review of not only the comprehensive plans of the 4 governments within the county, but also the community plans that are in there, identifying consistency, but also bringing forward some considerations that may not be consistent, that would need some more coordination if those concepts were to continue to move forward on some of these corridors. The majority of projects are consistent and in compliance with the local comprehensive plans, but certainly there are some projects that were determined not to be complementary that will need to be reviewed further. So what are those next steps? And I've run through this pretty quick, but I want to slow down a little bit here just to give you an idea of where we'll be going from this point, what we'll be doing with the rest of the analysis. There certainly is some more refinement that's needed on those major investment projects that we've been looking at and evaluating and determining those project costs. I think the schedule calls for us to come to the policy committee in July to bring some of that information to you, looking at summarizing the performance of these major investment projects. Where are we expecting to see the best benefit, if you will, from a delay reduction from those projects? Ultimately, during this summer, just like the MetroQuest survey that was done for the regional scenarios, there will be a regional survey or a survey that will go out within Hillsborough County to review the assessment of the needs, not just the capacity or the major investment needs that I've discussed so much this morning, but also the needs that are identified through those other performance programs that you have as part of your plan. Ultimately, that leads to the development of a cost-feasible long-range plan that you are scheduled to adopt into October based on the federal schedule. So kind of steps that are ahead of you. So,
Thank you, sir. Are there any questions?
Yes.
Commissioner Overman, you're recognized.
Thank you. Thank you for your report. It was very thorough and very informative, and I didn't find it in my backup material, so it was really great seeing this. Could you go back to the fixed guideway? Actually, to the, it might have been part of what was originally this, the state of our system report. In our backup does show the number of roads in 2045. There you go, that one. Actually, the slide prior to that shows various different modes of transit using fixed guideway and ferry and other resources, as well as obviously road expansion. But it's very clear from this illustration that, you know, we are going to be at a point in 2045 that roads is not going to be the solution. And it also is very clear that the road I-4 and the traffic from Plant City, also the road down to South County, are going to be some of the longest stretches of compromised traffic congestion by that point. So if you could do me a favor and move back to the fixed guideway illustration.
Yeah, let me just, so with this is our planning tool that helps us identify where congestion will be so we know what strategies to have in place moving forward.
Okay, got it. So when you get here, how is it that we aren't considering the fixed guideway that goes to Plant City and goes down to, you know, the county south of us? Because based on your analysis for 2040, it's very clear that the fixed guideway that goes to the east and to the south is going to be a necessary resource for meeting what our needs are in 2045. Now, I realize that may not have been part of our original plan, But it's very clear that the access to those resources, when we're having the conversation about fixed guideway, and in the survey that was done where we got 9,600 responses on what we would like to see, what our citizens would like to see our efforts, came back as the highest response was rail or something fixed guideway solution oriented. I'm not arguing about the technology, whatever it is, though. The right-of-way is what's critically important, clearly. But we're only looking at half of the system. Is there a reason that we can't really look in the mirror and say that we need to really look at the whole system?
Yeah, so I think the first thing I would just say on that, again, keep in mind these are the major projects. So projects that would be a bus rapid transit project, express bus service, those are in that Real Choices program, and those are considerations for those programs as far as connections along the State Road 60 corridor, down into South County as well along 41. So those are considerations that are in there that is not showing up on these as more major capital investment projects up front.
My point is, the survey came back and they didn't say they wanted a bus rapid transit. They said they wanted a kind of rail or some kind of rail dedicated system that they could get through where a lot of people got on it and they knew it was there and it was reliable. And that's my concern, is we don't seem to be following the desires of what our citizens have said makes sense to them. So I wanted to find out if that was, since the lines are there, and if we're looking at bus rapid transit for this fixed guideway solution, are we going to put them where the rail lines are, or are we going to put them on the highways?
Yeah, I don't know that there's been determination on those. Certainly the CSX corridor has been talked a lot.
Okay.
As a specific
Commissioner
corridor.
Kemp.
All right, just asking. Thank you.
Ms. Alden wants to answer that.
Just briefly, there are, of course, CSX-owned rail corridors in South Hillsborough County and east all the way to the Polk County line. We can test those as well. These were in here previously because CSX had indicated in a letter to HART a number of years ago that they were willing to talk about these corridors. But we can certainly test the other ones if that's your wish.
Commissioner Kemp, you recognized.
I think going out to the east, part of it is that CSX has an offer, or to the south. In terms of CSX, those aren't, they're using them for freight heavily so that they're not, they haven't been available to think about moving commuters on, but that's just to speak to the CSX. But being mode agnostic or as just identifying fixed guideway, I wouldn't see why you wouldn't have like 41 on here or something like that if you're just identifying fixed guideway opportunities. But the other thing I just wanted to ask about is fixed guideway in terms of the ferry, because ferry is federally identified as a fixed guideway. So I didn't see that up there. I just wanted to ask about that too. And just a couple of other things. Actually, I thought because I don't know, and maybe we can explore this sometime. I hear now that I-75 is totally and completely congested, and so I was surprised to see that it didn't actually reflect that much congestion by 2045 to me. And so I was a little surprised by those 2045 projections in terms of that. And the other, and I don't know, the development patterns or whatever, but that just was a little surprising to me. The other thing that right here, I'm glad you have this one up. There's that white area on I-4 through there. And I just wanted to say for the record, and I don't know about the future with this, but since we're going there with the future, we're talking about 2045. A recent film has been distributed that people are seeing called The Last Green Thread, which only says that there's only 2 wildlife corridors that are allowing for species to travel from across the I-4 corridor. It's totally blocked off by development in every place. And you can look at a night map and see, and the only dark areas are that area there that's marked in white, and then another area on the other side of Plant City, between Plant City and Lakeland. And I don't know what thought has been given. I mean, I think about Alligator Alley and how they've raised it up to accommodate different species and wildlife there, a wildlife corridor that they had to open up. And I'm not sure that that's been any part of any discussion at this time when we think about the future, but I would particularly be interested in knowing, I don't know how this starts, the conversation starts on this, but that we start to, the environmental studies, whatever we need to do. I think those two places, they said already there's been severe, they have DNA and everything else to show that the biodiversity isn't happening, that it's acting as a wall, all of I-4 across the central, the state of Florida. So anyway, I'm just putting that out there as the start of a conversation about how we move forward to look at that issue, because I think it's something that we have responsibility to do now for the future.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Sorry, Commissioner Smith, you recognize.
Yes, I wish this had been in our backup material, so I could have more thoroughly looked at this before we talked about it, but I would certainly like to have a copy of it sent digitally now. Can you go back to the slide of the population projections, please? It's a very thorough presentation, so thank you for that. Okay, yes, 650,000 more people by 2045. We get different figures at every other meeting. Coming from 2020, now, I mean, if you, let's see, population, that's at 1.5 to 2 million out at 2045. From here, there's just 550,000 more people by 2045 from today.
From today, yeah. I based that
Yeah.
off of the baseline 2016 number that was there.
Right, which makes it sound scarier than and less accurate, than it is. So, just a note on that. And I think I just want to echo every single thing that Commissioner Overman and Commissioner Kemp said, down to the wildlife corridor and the ferry and the congestion that is on I-75, which is my commute route now. So it is bad now. It's not going to get any better by 2045. But I'll make one more point, and that is that I think it's really important when you're considering transportation options and showing where the population is going to South County and the problems we're going to have and how we're going to solve them for all those people. It's important to keep in mind that those people in South County and East County and the people to come, the people that are here voted for the transit tax consistently, South and East County. And the people that are coming are going to be paying it along with the people that are here. And so they really need to know that we are considering them in these maps when we're showing, where the transit and transportation corridors are going to be, and that we're considering all options for moving them as quickly and efficiently as we're considering the other parts of the county.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Executive Director's report.
I will keep this short. You have a copy of our quarterly report as the MPO staff in your board folders. You also have a copy of the executive summary for the It's Time Tampa Bay survey that was done last summer. That is, again, that broad brush guidance for the long-range transportation plan. That is also posted up on our website for all members of the public to take a look at that. Again, that's our broad brush direction for the long-range plan, and we'll be following up on that with a more detailed survey this summer starting in June. That'll be called It's Time Hillsborough. And then our next two meetings, our TMA leadership group is meeting on June the 7th. That's going to be in Pasco County. And our next board meeting will be our annual public hearing on the Transportation Improvement Program. In addition to our annual update of our priority list, we will be considering an amendment to the Long-Range Transportation Plan for Section 7 of Tampa Bay Next. That's I-275 north of downtown Tampa. That is the project that you heard the Secretary discuss this morning. That is some incremental fixes to that portion of I-275. And that concludes my report.
Okay, is there any old business? Yes, ma'am. Any new business? Yes, Mayor.
I just wanted to publicly thank Executive Director Alden, Gina Torres, and other members of MPO who forwarded to the City of Temple Terrace the benefits of street painting. Our first street painting project is moving forward and will take place Saturday, May 18th, and again with the goals of calming traffic, safety, and beautification. So I did want to thank staff for what they forwarded to us that allowed us to move forward.
Okay. Let me say this on the new business. I know our meetings are important, but after about an hour and a half, we start losing quorums. So we need to, if at all possible, staff and members, to try to keep our meeting to an hour and a half, because I know there are some issues that will come up that we need to vote on it. If we don't have a quorum, and we just lost a quorum about 45 minutes ago. So if we can try to keep our meeting to an hour and a half at best, I think we can meet our needs that way. Okay. All right. See no further discussion. We'll adjourn.